I remember my childhood through the television screen. Sitting on the duvet in the middle of my parents' living room, it was late for me, maybe 7 p.m., on a cold Ukrainian night. I remember looking up at the moving pictures in a box, frame by frame. This was me at my most prime as a young child. In the mornings, the TV would be my own, giving me Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Disney Junior. Yes, we have those in Europe too. During recess, I would whip out my flip phone and suddenly kids were crowding around me, seeing who's the best at playing race cars or Snake. And in the evenings, my mother would hand me her computer as I would read my children's ebooks online before bed. The screens were my life. Since the Great Generation, all the way through to Generation Alpha, a little bit over half of the population has had the pleasure of media literacy. Raise your hand if you know what media literacy means. Okay, good, so a few of you. If you don't know what media literacy means, media literacy, by definition, is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and create media in all the forms that we know. However, over the recent years, the definition of media literacy has acquired an additional component. Media literacy is a 21st century approach to education. Media literacy builds an understanding of the role of media in the society, as well as essential skills of inquiry and self-expression necessary for citizens of a democracy. So, essentially, if you know what the internet is, chances are you have experienced media literacy. Both democracy and the internet are very new terms used in our educational vocabulary, and though they can be productive, they must be used with care. Before we delve in deeper, hi, my name is Yevheniia Nykonorova. I'm from the country known as Ukraine. I live in the city of Kiev, but I did spend a lot of my time in Crimea as a child, and unlike other Kievans, I attended international school. Okay, yes. Growing up with an international school culture can be strange at times, as having such a wide variety of resources and languages can be confusing to a little kid. At times, it felt like I was a foreigner in my own country. But international school also had its own ups, like when my American friends would bring in Fruit Roll-Ups and nerd candy to snack time. It would be like a scientific discovery for me every time. I'd rush back home to my mom, so excited, and I told her that I had nerds today. And my mother, she would always respond with an unimpressed, what? Because my mother, bless her heart, she doesn't know what nerds are, so here's a picture, in case you don't know. Anyways, another weird thing about going to international school is that you learn the English language fully before you know your own language properly. You have American teachers, you read American books, you go to school with majority American peers, and you speak the American English language from a very young age. There was always sort of a lack of my own culture around me, but I thought that was normal as I didn't really see my own culture be as represented in international media as, say, the United States. So, middle school me came to the conclusion that Ukraine is simply just lame. Now this, you could argue, is the product of a naive and impressionable mind, affected by the environment in which it's in. And though, to a degree, this may be true, but because I grew up with America being the central culture in my brain, my patriotism for Ukraine faded more and more with time, until the world around me became the 500 kids that I went to school with. During the time of 5th grade, this girl got her first phone, and this girl also noticed a few things shifting around her. In November 2013, the former Ukrainian president, Yanukovych, after insisting on signing a landmark political and trade deal with the European Union, instead spoke out against it in the face of opposition from Russia. This created a deep divide between pro-European West Ukraine and pro-Russian East Ukraine. Kiev, because of where it's situated, happened to skew to the east. This is an issue because it is no secret that the economy of the country has been stale for the 30 years that it's been an independent country, and the democracy has always teetered towards dictatorship. In the next few weeks to come, I noticed a few things shifting around me outside of my car window. This one time, my dad and I were driving through what would be called the Times Square of Ukraine, and we drove past the Parliament building. Around this Parliament building was a group of people standing with signs. My dad didn't say anything, and so I didn't think much of it. When I got home, my very pregnant mom explained to me that it was a protest. Again, I didn't think much of it. Later that night, though, as I was watching the TV in my living room, they showed a man. He was at this very same protest that we drove by silently the day before, and as the man lowered his sign, a gunshot was heard in the distance. Then the man fell to the ground. Logically, as a 10-year-old, I knew that people died due to acts of police brutality and violence. But this was the first time I've seen it on the TV, much less in the environment around me. The man's name was Yevheniia. He was an Armenian-Ukrainian activist said to have camped out at the protest scene for 6 weeks. He became more well-known through a documentary named Earth on Fire, where he was interviewed by a blogger only weeks before his death. He got shot by the Ukrainian equivalent of a SWAT team member, and his death was recorded on television, his being the first few of many hundreds to come. The next day, on my way to school, we drove by the same protest scene, and there were multiple ambulances. Later that night, the same night, my mother was well on her way to delivering my baby brother, Oleg, and so my grandma stayed with my sister and I. She didn't let us watch the news, and she just put on cartoons. What I didn't know at the time was that the hospital was only a few blocks away from the Parliament building, where the protest was. So as my mother lay there with her newborn son, she could hear gunshots and screams outside of her window. I'm glad I didn't know this at the time. In the next few weeks, my routine started settling into a pattern. In the mornings, I would see people standing with signs, and in the evenings, through a TV screen, I would see more and more people end up just like Suhi. My mother started to turn off the TV. She told me, "We hate Russians." Мы ненавидим Росіян. I grew up saying the words, "I hate Russians," "Я ненавиджу Росіян," without knowing what it meant. I was starting to know that this wasn't necessarily the roots of the problem, but my naivety craved answers, and so I took whatever was given. As the months progressed, the smell of burning tires filled the air, and suddenly my school was having airstrike drills. My 10-year-old self learned how to respond to a new alarm, put my hands behind my head, and walk out of my classroom and line up silently up near the corridor walls. Sorry for stuttering. On March 1st, Russian military infiltrated Crimean territory. The neighborhood in which my parents used to rent an apartment during the summers got overrun. Seeing the image of how I remember the neighborhood versus how it looked like now with all the people in it, it made me think of a few things. The first being is that the situation in Ukraine currently is depicted like a lot of other developing nations, take Yemen or Syria. And a lot of times when we are faced with situations like this, we fail to realize that there are people, more specifically young children, that do lead lives there. On the Russian news, they call us aggressive, sometimes cowards, sometimes tentative. It's a mix of a few things, but most importantly, it is all extremely misleading. This leads me to the reason that I bring up media. News, social media, the internet. Before, we haven't really had a nationwide database access to a whole arsenal of information, but now that we do, it can inform us of any dangers, it can confirm our biases, and most importantly, it can act as an instigator. The stark contrast of what my family was telling me, what I would see on the screen, and what I would see on the news was so dramatically different that in the end, it didn't matter what I saw on the screen. What mattered was how a 10-year-old girl perceived the world around her. Walking away from this, I want you all to know that the war in Crimea goes on to this day. It is not uncommon to see a group of young soldiers on the back of an army truck on their way to the next military headquarters. It is not over. Very recently, around the time of December of 2018, a warship attack happened on one of Ukraine's coasts. I was away at this time, and so seeing the news through my phone screen, a realization dawned upon me. This is all that I would be given, only what I see on the screen. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you.
Wow.